Hi, welcome to Mondays with Michelle. Today we're going to be talking about the role of values and uniqueness on the path to authenticity. Mondays with Michelle is a sanctuary where we unite to inspire hope and peace through engaging discussions about mental health, relationships, and parenting. I'm Michelle, your guide through the sanctuary. I'm a mental health therapist with over 14 years of experience, an aspiring author currently navigating the book proposal process, a peacemaker, and an advocate for those without a voice. All right, well, let's get started. So, we always start Mondays with Michelle with a card. These are positive affirmation cards. This one is from a deck about you being awesome. So this card that I chose for today is I'm amazed by what you have already accomplished and how much you continue to do. I consider you a superstar. So that what a lovely way to start our day and our conversation about authenticity. So what is authenticity? Carl Rogers had a really great saying. His quote is, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I change." It does talk to how we are always changing. There's an ebb and flow. Nothing ever stays the same. And there's some benefits to just allowing ourselves to go with the flow. The other piece of that is obviously the piece of accepting ourselves, just who we are in the present moment, our strengths, our weaknesses, who we are as a person, our hobbies, our interests, our talents, our gifts that we're able to share with the world. So Maslow, Abraham Maslow, is another famous psychologist. He is the one who developed Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is somewhat of a simple pyramid, but it's also pretty powerful to describe our physical and emotional needs. At the very bottom level of the pyramid are our physiological needs, which include, most people know this kind of stuff is very basic stuff. Like we have to be able to breathe air, we need water to drink, we need food to eat. So the very basic level of human personality or the things that motivate us as humans are our physiological needs. Then the level above that are our safety needs. So we need a safe home to live in, we need employment, financial security, resources, health, property. All of those things help to keep us safe. Then the next layer up is love and belonging. Those are things like friendship, intimacy, partnership, family, and feeling connected, that sense of connection with the universe around us and with our community. And then we get up to esteem, the next level, which is things like respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. And then finally, that brings us to the highest level, which is called self-actualization. And this is where authenticity comes into play. With self-actualization is the desire to become the most that one can be. It's like reaching that place of your highest potential. And authenticity really goes into that layer, that level. I look at it as being one of the highest levels that you can get to as a human. And it really means just getting to know yourself, what motivates you, what impacts you, what are your unique talents and gifts that you can share with the world, and how can that help you achieve like your meaning and purpose in life. So that brings us to the next topic of our conversation, which is values. Erik Erickson was another famous psychologist. He developed like the different parts of the different stages of human development, the psychosocial stages of development. And he included kind of the battle that goes on within us within each of those stages, and then the goal, quality, or trait that we're supposed to achieve once we make it through that stage. So, in my article for the week on authenticity, I talked about how teenagers, they're in this place in their life where they want to fit in, they want friends, they may care and be concerned about what other people think about them. But at the same time, they're figuring out who they are as a person, which also means what makes them stand out. So I'm going to read technically a couple excerpts. This first one, we'll talk a little bit about what I just said, and it's from Erik Erickson's book, The Life Cycle Completed. And Joan Erickson actually added the 9th stage of development to Erik Erickson's work, which was really nice. That's kind of a final life stage is what was added. But as far as adolescence goes, they are in a crisis point in between like developing their identity versus having identity confusion. So like I said, it is really just all about them developing their identity is what happens in the teenage years and adolescence. And then the goal that we get out of that stage of development is what's called fidelity. So that's a little of the background, and I'll go ahead and read this excerpt. Adolescence harbors some sensitive, if fleeting, sense of existence, as well as a sometimes passionate interest in ideological values of all kinds: religious, political, intellectual, including at times an ideology of adjustment to the times patterns of adjustment and success. Here, the upheavals characterizing the adolescence of other times can remain strangely dormant. So I think that's a really powerful description of what exactly adolescence is like. On one hand, like I said, you're figuring out or wanting to kind of fit in with the world, but at the same time, there is like this upheaval going on and these generational differences. Myself, in my generation, my experiences as a teenager and what was going on in the world is definitely different than the things that are impacting teenagers today. I think most of us in my generation joke that, we had the old phones where you had to like push the number several times to, get the letter that you wanted on your text messages. So it took forever to text. And, so they tended to be a little bit shorter. And hence, the abbreviations developed. So we didn't have to type so much out. But now, I mean, devices are just so different. They're smartphones. So you can write out so much and accomplish so much on a phone that you would not want to do on an old phone when I was a kid. So that was an example of how things are different between, the different generations. I also like how it talks about sometimes things get pretty passionate. Teenagers can get pretty passionate about their interests and, maybe a little argumentative with parents, other adults, authority figures. because they really are just going through this upheaval and challenging the status quo. And all of that's necessary for them to develop their own personal identity. So, all of that's part of figuring out who we are and what's important to us. So how do those values develop? How do we figure out what's important to us? Typically, that involves, they develop during childhood, and it involves our family, especially our parents or caregivers, school, and our communities, such as like a church or, other sort of community kind of centers. So, our family definitely passes along morals and values. A pretty simple example is if family prioritizes that quality time together, then the child is typically going to develop that as a value. And when they become parents, then that's something they may want to do with their children. School, kids obviously spend a lot of time at school, so schools help to develop those morals and values. Another simple example for school is the value of knowledge. So, hopefully kids are learning a lot. They're learning the core subjects, plus the arts when they're going to school. And so when they complete that process, ideally, they will have a value of education, of knowledge, wisdom, those types of things to then continue to pass on as well. And then our community, like if we go to church, then that has a set of morals and values that we may integrate into our own belief systems as well. So that's kind of a little bit of how our values tend to develop. And then that leads us, we'll do this a little bit later, but just to give you just kind of a little preview, we're going to be talking about Brené Brown's Dare to Lead list of values and doing an activity based on that. So it's a little bit of a heads up. And then that takes us to uniqueness. I already talked about this battle that teenagers have between fitting in with the crowd versus standing out, figuring out who exactly they are and what's important to them. So the other excerpt that I chose from the Life Cycle Completed is role repudiation can appear in the form of diffidence, covering a certain slowness and weakness in relation to any available identity potential, or in the form of a systemic defiance. I like that one because, how often do you think of teenage years and you do think of, a little bit of defiance there and, that battling the status quo. I've already talked about that a little bit. But it also helps us figure out what is unique about us. Maybe what is the task of our generation that was different than other generations? How are we going to make the world a better place? So that kind of defiance of teenagers is absolutely necessary and is beneficial. To just really think a little bit deeper about the world and also figure out what makes us unique. And then kind of how are we going to express that in a way that makes sense to our identity. He does go on to say there are some ways teenagers maybe rebuke the status quo that isn't necessarily beneficial for the development of an identity. Which is interesting how sometimes teenagers can develop that uniqueness and express it in a way that maybe isn't accepted by others, which can hinder some of the identity development. But for the most part, it's a very healthy process to, really embrace and accept who you are as a human to fully develop that identity. And that really coincides with our topic this week of authenticity. Teenagers are figuring out how to be true to themselves and true to the people they care about, while also navigating hormonal changes and all the things that teenagers have to go through on a daily basis. So, as I somewhat mentioned, part of that uniqueness piece of authenticity is self acceptance. Accepting it's okay to be different. I've been thinking, I know this is probably odd, but I watched a show on fingerprints yesterday, and it's not odd, it's unique. I watched a show on fingerprints yesterday. And it really got me thinking about how our fingerprints capture our uniqueness. Because every line, every swirl, it's unique to us. It's our identifier. Um so part of that relates to our self-acceptance of ourself. Could you potentially change your fingerprint? Maybe, but for the most part, no. Our fingerprint is going to be our fingerprint. So we just accept that for what it is. And that's the same way we are. We are who we are. And it's important to accept ourselves for who we are. I know in my article I wrote this week, I talked about things like trees grow in the direction they grow in without asking anybody's permission. Flowers bloom in their own time. Birds can migrate extensive distances. They can travel hundreds, if not thousands, of miles without ever asking anyone for directions. They don't have maps that they follow. I would argue they probably have internal maps, those navigation systems that are innate to them, but I am not a bird expert in any way, shape, or form. So, from the outside, they just do all of that very innately. And that's true of us too. We have this fingerprint that we're meant to leave on the world. We have this internal direction that's going to help guide us throughout our entire life. So if we spend our life trying to battle against ourselves, that's not really going to get us anywhere. Versus if we just accept ourselves and the path that's laid out before us, knowing we do have some choice in there as well, that's going to get us a lot farther in life. And once we're able to accept ourselves and for all of the things that make us authentic and being able to be an authentic self, an authentic person, then we can start moving into accepting others. Kind of connecting back to the psychologist Carl Rogers, who I talked about at first. He's one of the founding fathers of the humanistic theory of psychology. He talked about something called unconditional positive regard. Therapists actually have this, or are supposed to have this, for the clients that we work with, where we just accept the other for who they are without judgment. So when people are living their authentic lives and being their authentic self, it's important to have that unconditional positive regard for them. Instead of trying to change another human being, accept them for who they are, strengths and weaknesses together, and then you can decide how you're going to respond to that. That's the choice you have. We can't change other people, but we can choose how much time we spend with another person, if there's somebody we want in our life, if there's somebody we trust, and we want to spend a lot of time with. So positive regard helps us to just accept people for who they are and let them be their authentic selves as well. All right. So that brings us to our activity for the week. So this is in the description of the podcast. You will find a link. It was also in my Authentic Self article that I posted this past Saturday. So you will definitely find the link to Brene Brown's list of values. So pull that up. If you don't have paper to print it out, no worries. Just write down the 10 values that really stand out to you as your top priorities, and then rank order them in the order of importance to you. So 1 is your highest priority, the thing that has the most meaning, the value that has the most meaning to you. And then 10 is the least out of your top 10. But then maybe write those on like an index card or somewhere where you can look at them. That way you can live according to your values, because that does help us with decision making. Like if we value time with family, then we may say no to working overtime at work because we want to spend that time with our family. So, complete that activity. That's our activity for the week. And now I want you to create an intention for the week of how you plan to celebrate your uniqueness. You are a special individual. You have higher meaning and purpose in the world. How can you celebrate that this week? Kind of the fun things that make you you. All right, and on that note, that brings us to our weekly reflection. And again, this will be in the written part to the podcast, so don't feel like you have to write everything down as I'm talking. You can definitely just read it and journal about it sometime this week. Reflect on the individuals who have significantly shaped your values and inspired you to embrace your authentic self. Take a moment to express gratitude to those who supported you along the way. What characteristics or experiences contribute to your sense of uniqueness? What makes you stand out from the crowd? What makes you special, different, unique? As the card said, what makes you a superstar? We're all superstars in our own way. What makes you a superstar? All right. If you have any questions about authenticity, please feel free to put those in the comments. And if you have any questions about mental health, relationships, and parenting in general, email those to hopepiecetogether@gmail.com. Next week, we'll be discussing self-confidence, so somewhat building on this topic. And I look forward to talking to you then. And as a heads up, there are going to be some really exciting things coming within the next few weeks and next couple months. So stay tuned to that. And also, quick follow up before I say goodbye. Last week on the podcast, if you missed it, just find last week's episode on creativity. I shared that if I had time over the weekend, I would do the activity that we laid out. So I did that. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I did draw my picture. The prompt was draw a picture of a boat, storm, and lighthouse, and then write a story about it. So that's my picture. And if you want to read this little, very short story I wrote about it, feel free to check it out. It's in my notes section of my Substack page. So just click on notes and then it's boat, storm, lighthouse, and you'll be able to read that. And if you completed that activity or when you complete it, I would love for you to share those things in the comments. So I would really appreciate seeing your creativity and what makes you unique in the world. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to share this time with you, and I look forward to our conversation next week. Have a good one.